Welcome to Liberty Voice USA, the home of truth, facts, and unfiltered political reality. In a time when narratives are scripted and justice often bends beneath the weight of partisanship, our mission is simple: to expose what others ignore, to tell the story behind the story, and to remind America that integrity still matters, both in our courts and in our country. Today, something remarkable unfolded inside the nation's highest judicial chamber, a moment that caught even seasoned observers by surprise. It wasn't the usual verbal sparring between legal heavyweights or another partisan spectacle. It was something different, something raw, precise, and deeply human. Justice Stephen Breyer, a man known for his decades of intellect and calm authority, found himself quietly stunned not by a senior attorney or a constitutional scholar, but by Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Her brilliance, her precision, and her fearless command of the truth left the courtroom in complete silence. What happened in that room was not a performance. It was an awakening, a reminder that political titles don't define intelligence, and seniority doesn't guarantee clarity. As Crockett spoke, she didn't just present an argument. She dismantled layers of hypocrisy that had become too comfortable in America's halls of power. Her words cut through the fog of formality, reminding everyone, including the justices, that beneath the robes and marble, truth still has a pulse. Justice Breyer, long respected for his thoughtfulness and civility, listened intently, his expressions shifting from measured patience to quiet reflection as Crockett drew a line between principle and privilege. She spoke about the court's obligation to the people, not to politics, and the growing concern that Americans no longer trust the judicial process to be above the political fray. There was no hostility in her tone, only conviction. She asked the questions many Americans have been thinking, but few have dared to ask in such a setting. Questions about how the Supreme Court could maintain credibility when ethics reforms are resisted. Questions about why transparency in financial disclosures is treated as optional rather than essential. Questions about whether the court still remembers that its legitimacy flows not from tradition but from trust. For a moment, there was no interruption, no deflection, just silence. Justice Breyer leaned forward, his eyes steady, his demeanor calm but clearly engaged. And when he responded, his words were careful, deliberate. He acknowledged the importance of public confidence, the fragility of judicial independence, and the need for internal reform to preserve both. It was not an admission of guilt or failure. It was an acknowledgment of responsibility. And that acknowledgment, subtle as it was, carried weight. Because in that moment, a bridge formed, not between partisan camps, but between principle and conscience. Breyer's respect for Crockett's intellect was evident. Her mastery of the facts, her command of the law, and her unwavering commitment to accountability made it clear that she wasn't there to perform for headlines. She was there to restore integrity to the conversation. In an era when political discourse has decayed into sound bites and outrage, this moment stood apart. It was reasoned, it was dignified, it was what democracy is supposed to look like. Two public servants from different generations and branches of government meeting at the intersection of truth and responsibility. The shock wasn't in what was said, it was in how it was said. Crockett didn't shout, she didn't grandstand, she didn't speak in slogans or platitudes. She spoke like someone who understood the stakes, that faith in the judiciary is not just a constitutional matter, but a moral one. Her calm clarity made the silence in that courtroom feel heavy, the kind of silence that comes not from confusion, but from realization.
Outside the chamber, reactions were swift. Commentators across the spectrum couldn't ignore the impact. Some praised her for bringing courage and clarity to an institution often shrouded in procedural formality. Others criticized her for challenging judicial decorum. But regardless of where one stood politically, the message was unmistakable. Respect is not demanded, it's earned. And on that day, she earned it. Breyer, now in retirement, but still deeply respected as one of the court's most thoughtful voices, represented the old guard, a generation of jurists who valued balance, process, and restraint. Crockett represented something newer, a generation unwilling to accept that justice must always move slowly or that reform must wait for permission. Their exchange symbolized something bigger than either of them, a reckoning between tradition and transformation. In that tension lies the heartbeat of democracy itself. The court is not infallible. It was never meant to be. It exists not above the people, but because of them. And when the people, through their elected representatives, demand transparency, that demand is not an attack. It is a reminder that in America, power is borrowed, not owned. What makes Crockett's performance so unforgettable is that she didn't try to outshine Breyer. She illuminated the truth beside him. She didn't diminish his legacy. She added to it, reminding us that real progress happens when intellect meets courage, when questions are asked not to embarrass, but to enlighten. In a time when so many politicians weaponize words for division, this was a masterclass in the power of reason. Her argument wasn't emotional, it was factual. Her tone wasn't confrontational, it was steady. And that balance between passion and precision is what left the courtroom still. Because even the most experienced minds recognize brilliance when it walks in quietly, armed with truth. If the Supreme Court symbolizes the soul of justice, then moments like this remind us what keeps that soul alive: accountability, humility, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths. Breyer's thoughtful silence was not weakness, it was respect. Respect for the fact that democracy is not static. It evolves, it questions, and sometimes it surprises even its wisest guardians. As the hearing concluded, those who witnessed it described the air in the chamber as electric. No shouting, no applause, just quiet acknowledgement that something meaningful had taken place, something that cut through years of political fog and reminded everyone why these conversations matter. Back outside, Crockett was asked if she felt intimidated questioning a justice of Breyer's stature. Her answer was simple: "I respect the court, but respect doesn't mean silence." Those words capture exactly what this moment represents. Not defiance, but duty. The duty of every public servant to uphold the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it challenges power. It is moments like these that restore faith, not just in individuals, but in the very idea that democracy can still correct itself. When intellect meets integrity, truth is not just spoken, it resonates. And that resonance, however brief, reminds us that politics does not have to poison everything it touches. Sometimes it can purify it. As the camera shut off and the crowd dispersed, one thing became clear. Justice Breyer may have been stunned, but he was not offended. He was reminded, as we all were, that justice is a living conversation, not a settled script.
And it takes voices like Jasmine Crockett's to keep that conversation honest. In a nation where so much of the truth has been traded for convenience, courage like hers is more than political, it's patriotic, because the measure of leadership isn't how loudly you speak, but how clearly you stand for what's right. Moments like this don't fade easily. They echo through the marble halls, through the headlines, and through the conscience of a country still wrestling with what justice really means. And so, as the dust settles and the debate continues, one truth remains undeniable. Democracy still belongs to those brave enough to question it. Stay tuned, stay aware, and stay truthful. This is Liberty Voice USA, where facts speak louder than politics.